We're selling the house. Mom, you don't need all this space. The words just hung there in the air, right in the middle of my kitchen. My kitchen. The one James, my late husband, built with his own two hands. I was sitting at the table he made, the one where we'd had thousands of meals, where our son Michael had done his homework every night for years. Michael was standing over me, looking down like I was some kind of problem he had to solve. His wife, Tiffany, was right there by his shoulder, one foot tapping on the linoleum floor, impatient. The morning sun was streaming through the window, lighting up all the little dust motes dancing in the air, and it made the whole moment feel like it wasn't real, like I was watching a movie about somebody else's life. After he said it, the silence in that house was heavy, like a thick blanket you couldn't push off. It was the kind of quiet that's so loud it hurts your ears. I just looked at my son, the boy I raised in this very house, and I tried to find a piece of him that I recognized. It's funny how your whole life can feel like it's flashing before your eyes, not when you're dying, but when someone you love tries to take it away from you. Sitting there, I wasn't just in that kitchen. I was back in 1978, standing on the empty patch of dirt that would become our front yard. James had his arm around me and he was pointing, saying, "Right there, Ellie. That's where the living room window will be. So you can see the sunset every evening." We didn't have much back then, just a whole lot of love and a dream that was bigger than our bank account. This house wasn't just a building to us. It was a promise. A promise we made to each other, to build a life, a family, a home. I remember the smell of sawdust that clung to James's clothes for years. He wasn't a professional carpenter, but he had a gift. He built the bookshelves in the den, the back porch where we'd sit on summer nights, this very kitchen table. Every nail, every board was a piece of him, a piece of us. When Michael was born, we planted that big oak tree out front. It was just a little sapling then, no bigger than he was. We'd measure his height on the door frame in the hallway every year on his birthday. I can still see those little pencil marks, climbing higher and higher. This house wasn't just walls and a roof. It was the keeper of our memories. It held the echoes of laughter from every birthday party, the smell of every Thanksgiving turkey, the sound of James's voice humming as he fixed something that was broken. It was the place I brought my baby home to, and the place I said my last goodbye to my husband. Michael used to love this house as much as we did. He was such a sweet boy, always my little man. He'd follow his daddy around with a toy hammer, wanting to help with everything. He'd sit right here at this table and tell me about his day, his dreams, his first crush. He was a good boy, a good son. But things started to change. Slowly at first, so slowly you could almost convince yourself you were imagining it. It started after he went off to college and met Tiffany. The first time it really hit me, they were home for a visit. I'd made his favorite meal, pot roast with all the fixings. We were all standing in the kitchen, and Tiffany was looking around with this little frown on her face. She ran her hand over the countertop James had installed and said, "You know, a nice granite would really update this space. These old laminate counters are so dated." I waited for Michael to say something, to defend the kitchen he grew up in, the counters his father had picked out with such care. But he just shrugged. "Yeah, I guess," he said, not even looking at me. That was the first time I saw a flicker of something cold in his eyes, but I pushed it aside. I told myself I was just being a sensitive old woman, that I needed to let my son grow up. A few years later, after James got his diagnosis, the change was more obvious. Michael started talking about our portfolio and our assets. He'd come over and instead of asking how his father was feeling, he'd talk about the housing market. "You know," he said one afternoon while James was resting, "you and Dad really should have downsized years ago. There's a lot of equity tied up in this place that's not working for you." I remember James overheard him from the other room. He came out, slow and tired, but his voice was as steady as ever. This house is our life, son, he said, his hand finding mine. It's not a line on a spreadsheet. Michael just looked annoyed, like his father didn't understand the modern world. After James passed, the whole world felt like it was wrapped in cotton. There's this thing people call grief brain fog, and child, it is real. I couldn't think straight. I'd walk into a room and forget why I was there. The simplest things, like paying a bill or deciding what to eat for dinner, felt like climbing a mountain. The house, once so full of life, was just empty. The silence was the worst part. It was a physical thing, pressing in on me from all sides. Michael and Tiffany started coming around more, and at first, I was grateful. I thought they were there to help me through the hardest time of my life. But their help felt more like a takeover. They didn't ask me what I wanted or needed. They told me, "Mom, you can't handle all this paperwork, let us do it. Mom, this place is too big for you to clean, we should hire a service." They talked at me, not to me. They spoke in low voices in the other room, making plans for my life like I wasn't even there. They were talking about what was practical and sensible, but they never once asked me how I was feeling. They never once just sat with me in the quiet and let me cry. They were busy, so busy, managing my grief, managing my life, managing my house. And that's what led us back to that morning at the kitchen table. He laid out their whole plan like he was a general commanding an army. They had already talked to a realtor. They had already picked out a nice little condo for me on the other side of town, near a strip mall. They would handle everything, he said. He kept using the word unburden. "We just want to unburden you, Mom." But what I heard was, "We want your house. We want the money. You are in the way." He thought he was doing me a favor. He looked at me, waiting for me to thank him for dismantling my life, for erasing the last physical piece of his father I had left. When they finally left that day, the front door clicking shut behind them, it felt like all the air had been sucked out of the house. The pain was a physical thing, a crushing weight on my chest. It was a double grief. I was mourning my James all over again, and now, I was mourning the son I thought I had raised. I felt so small, so powerless. I sat at that table for hours, just staring at the wood grain, tracing the patterns with my finger. I felt like a ghost in my own home. That night, I couldn't sleep. The bed felt too big, too empty. Every creak of the house sounded like a footstep that wasn't James's. Around 2 in the morning, I got up and went to his office. I hadn't really touched anything in there since he passed. It was still his space. His books on the shelves, his reading glasses on the desk, the faint smell of his aftershave still lingering in the air. I just wanted to be near him, to feel his strength. I sat in his big leather chair and just breathed. After a while, my eyes fell on the bottom drawer of his desk. It was a place he kept important papers. On an impulse I can't explain, I pulled it open. Right on top was a big, thick manila envelope. In James's familiar, strong handwriting, it said, "For my Ellie." My hands were shaking as I opened it. Inside, there was our will, a thick stack of legal documents, and a letter. A letter from James, written just a few months before he died. I opened his letter first. "My dearest Ellie," it started. "If you're reading this, it means I'm gone, and I'm so sorry I had to leave you. I know your heart is hurting, but I need you to be strong now. You've always been the strongest person I know. I've been worried lately, watching Michael. He's a good man at heart, but that wife of his, she sees the world in dollar signs. I worry he's starting to see it that way too. He's becoming more Tiffany's son than ours. This house is your home, Ellie. It's our home. I never want you to feel like you have to leave. I've made sure of it. I had Mr. Henderson, our lawyer, draw up something special to protect you. Read his letter, and then call him. He'll explain everything. Always know I love you more than words can say. Your James." Tears were streaming down my face, blurring the words. It was like he was right there in the room with me, holding my hand. After I collected myself, I picked up the lawyer's letter. It was written in plain, simple language, not a lot of legal jargon. And that's when I saw the words for the first time. Life estate. Mr. Henderson explained it all. James had left the house to Michael in the will, yes, but he had left me a lifetime estate. He broke it down so I could understand. As the life tenant, I had the absolute right to live in the house, to use it, to enjoy it, for the rest of my life. Nobody, not even the owner on paper, could force me to leave. It was my home until my last breath. I was responsible for the ordinary things, like paying the property taxes and the insurance, and keeping the place in good repair, which I'd always done anyway. Michael, the letter said, was the remenderman. He was the future owner. He had an interest in the property, but he couldn't take possession of it until I passed away. And here was the most important part. He could not sell or mortgage the property without my agreement. My express, written consent. We both had to sign off on any sale. As I sat there in the quiet of my husband's office, a strange feeling washed over me. The crushing pain was still there, but underneath it, something else was growing. It was a cold, hard calm. It felt like steel settling in my bones. James had known. He had seen what was coming, and he had left me a shield. He had protected me one last time. My first thought was to march over to Michael's house, wave these papers in his face, and tell him exactly what he could do with his little condo. But then I stopped. What would that solve? It would just be a big, ugly fight. It would be screaming and yelling and more heartache. It would probably destroy what little was left of our family for good. And I knew deep down, that's not what James would have wanted. So, I made a decision, right there in that leather chair. I wasn't going to fight him. I wasn't going to argue. I was going to let him think he had won. I would let him go on with his plans, let his arrogance and his greed lead him down the path he had chosen. And I would just sit back and let the truth and the law do the work for me. My plan wasn't about revenge. It was about quiet vindication. It was about letting my son's own character be his undoing. Of course, I was scared. My heart was pounding just thinking about it. What if I had misunderstood the papers? What if there was some loophole I didn't see? Michael had a temper, and Tiffany, well, Tiffany was like gasoline on a fire. If they found out what I was doing, things could get even uglier. I worried about the financial mess he was about to walk into. Because despite everything, despite the coldness in his eyes and the greed in his heart, he was still my boy. The stakes weren't just this house. The stakes were everything. My whole quiet plan hinged on something James and I had been talking about just before he got too sick. The roof over the back porch had a slow leak. It wasn't a big deal yet, just a little drip when it rained hard, but we knew it needed to be replaced soon. It wasn't a simple patch job. It was a major repair. The first thing I did was call Mr. Henderson, the lawyer. I read him the part of his letter about my responsibilities and Michael's. I asked him, "Mr. Henderson, a new roof. Is that ordinary maintenance?" I could almost hear him smile over the phone. "No, Eleanor," he said. "That's a capital improvement. A major structural repair. The life tenant, that's you, is responsible for ordinary upkeep. But the remainderman, that's Michael, is responsible for major repairs that protect the long-term value of the property. After all, it's his future inheritance he's protecting. If he fails to make those repairs, and the property is damaged because of it, that's a legal issue called permissive waste." That was all I needed to hear. The next day, I went to the post office and I sent Michael a certified letter. I kept it simple and formal. I wrote that I was officially notifying him, as the remainderman of the property, that the roof was failing and required replacement to prevent further structural damage. I enclosed 2 estimates from reputable roofing companies. And I kept a copy of the letter and the receipt from the post office. It felt like I was arming myself for a battle I didn't want to fight. A few days later, my phone rang. It was Michael. He wasn't happy. Mom, what is this? He said, his voice sharp with irritation. I got some letter about the roof. Don't worry about the roof. We're selling the place as is, remember? Let the new owners deal with it. Stop trying to throw a wrench in things. I just said, okay, Michael. I just thought you should know. And I hung up. He had no idea that the wrench wasn't in his plans. It was in the law. He had just dismissed his legal duty without a second thought, blinded by his own entitlement. Months went by. Every time it rained, I'd hear the drip, drip, drip on the back porch, and my heart would ache. A small brown water stain appeared on the ceiling, and it started to grow, like a bruise. It was a physical symbol of my son's neglect, a stain on the home his father had built. Meanwhile, Michael and Tiffany were moving full steam ahead. They had a realtor come over, a slick young woman who agreed with Tiffany that the house should be listed for a very high price. They put a for sale sign in my front yard, right next to the oak tree James and I had planted. It felt like a slap in the face every time I pulled into the driveway. They found a buyer pretty quickly, a nice young family with 2 little kids. They seemed so excited. Michael was triumphant. He called me, crowing about the offer they'd accepted. He was already talking about the investments he and Tiffany were going to make with his money. The sale was all contingent on a home inspection, of course. The day of the inspection was one of the longest days of my life. I was a bundle of nerves. I stayed in my bedroom, listening to the inspector walking around, his footsteps echoing through the house. What if he missed the roof damage? What if the buyers were so in love with the house they didn't care? My entire quiet plan, my one shield against losing my home, rested on this one man doing his job properly. The call came 2 days later. It wasn't the realtor. It was Michael. And he was frantic. I could hear Tiffany screaming in the background. Mom, Ellie! He yelled into the phone, his voice cracking with panic and rage. The inspection, it was a disaster. The deal is off, Ellie. He was at my door 20 minutes later, waving a thick report in his hand. His face was pale, and his eyes were wild. This is your fault, Ellie, he shouted, shoving the papers at me. You let this happen. You have to pay for this, Ellie. I took the report and sat down at the kitchen table. His kitchen table. My kitchen table. The inspector hadn't just found a little leak. He'd found what happens when a little leak is ignored for months. There was extensive water damage in the attic. The report had pictures of rotted support beams. And worst of all, there was mold. A dangerous kind of black mold that had spread through the insulation. The estimated cost to fix everything, the new roof, the structural repairs, the mold remediation, was staggering. It was nearly a quarter of what they were trying to sell the house for. The buyers, of course, had backed out. Their lawyer had sent a letter saying they would only proceed if all the repairs were made before the sale. The realtor had told Michael that no bank would ever approve a mortgage for a new buyer on a property with that much documented structural damage. He couldn't sell it. He was trapped. He stood there, breathing hard, looking at me with so much anger. You knew about this, didn't you? You have to fix it. I didn't say a word. I just stood up, went into James's office, and came back with my own set of papers. I laid them out on the table, right next to the inspector's report. There was the will. There was Mr. Henderson's letter explaining the life estate. And on top, there was the copy of the certified letter I had sent him months ago, the one he had laughed at. I finally looked up at him, and my voice was as calm and steady as a clear winter morning. No, Michael, I said quietly. It's not my responsibility. It's yours. I watched his face as he read. I saw the confusion, then the dawning horror, then the fury, and then nothing. Just the blank look of complete and utter defeat. I explained it to him, simply. I am the life tenant. You are the remainderman. You can't sell this house without my signature. And you are responsible for major repairs. I pointed to the copy of my letter. I notified you, Michael. In writing. You chose to ignore it. You let this happen. This is your waste. Your responsibility. The power in that room shifted so completely, it was like the floor had tilted. He had come to me as the conquering hero, ready to cash in his inheritance and put his old mother in a box. Now, he was just a boy in a whole lot of trouble, looking at his mom to fix a mess that was entirely of his own making. The sale, of course, fell through. Michael didn't have the money for the repairs, not even close. He and Tiffany had a terrible fight. I heard from a neighbor she packed a bag and went to her mother's for a week. A few days later, Michael came back. Alone. He sat at the kitchen table, the same place where this whole nightmare had started, and he just cried. He looked so lost, so broken. He finally looked at me and said he was sorry. Truly sorry. I didn't gloat. There was no joy in seeing my son in so much pain. I just put my hand on his and said, "This house was never about money, Michael. It was about family. Your father knew that. He loved you, but he knew he had to protect me. He was just making sure I'd always have a home. We're still working through it, me and Michael. The trust that was broken will take a long time to heal." But he started coming over again, by himself, just to talk. We sit on the back porch, the one with the leaky roof that he's now trying to figure out how to pay to fix, and we just talk. It's a start. The moral of this whole story, I guess, isn't about legal papers or loopholes. It's about knowing your worth, even when the people you love forget it. It's about the quiet strength that comes not from fighting loud battles, but from holding on to what's true. And it's about understanding that a home, a real home, is built with a whole lot more than just wood and nails. It's built with love, and that's something no amount of money can ever buy. Have you ever had a moment in your life where you had to find a strength you didn't know you had, just to hold on to what was rightfully yours? I know stories like this can bring up a lot of feelings. I'd love to hear from you. Please, share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Sometimes just telling your story is the first step to healing. If this story touched your heart, please give this video a like. It helps more people find our little community here. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories about life, love, and the strength we find when we need it most. You take care now.